Hey, good morning, Phil.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I wanted to talk to you about the state of the patriarchy today. It seems like you're sort of an expert in issues surrounding men and boys, and I was connected to you via my conversation with George from the Tin Men. Right, became more aware of your content, and so I wanted you to give maybe a quick overview of who you are, what you work with, and what you specialize in, and tongue in cheek, like give me a state of the patriarchy. How are the guys doing?
Okay, well, first of all, I would certainly not describe myself as an expert. I'm probably just a very vocal guy that addresses things and goes from there. And whilst I have a lot of knowledge in certain areas and experience in certain areas, there are people out there that have got considerably more knowledge and expertise and knowledge than I have. So I don't think I call myself an expert, but I'd certainly say I specialise in certain areas. So I'm a counsellor and psychotherapist. I predominantly work with boys and men who have experienced abuse. So it originally started out working with boys and men who had been sexually abused. In other sectors I worked where they were assessed by children's social care as being at risk of experiencing sexual abuse. But then through I don't know how it happened really, but just through sort of adopting a sort of pro male approach, I found that I ended up working with men and boys who had also experienced physical abuse, domestic abuse, coercive control, other types of abuse, paternity fraud, false allegations, the sort of issues that really do affect men, but we don't often talk about. Um, and so that's kind of, I'd say the vast majority of the people that I see in therapy, yeah, most of them are boys and men, and most of them have experienced some sort of sexual or other types of abuse as children, adults or both. In addition to that, I deliver training and webinars on identifying boys who are being or might be being sexually abused and how our gendered perceptions of risk can influence our risk assessments and how we need to change that. And also, I deliver training on how to work with boys and men and adopting what we call sort of male friendly methods, kind of practices and ways of working that are generally, on average, more attractive to boys and men. And of course, I supervise trainee and qualified counsellors and other practitioners as well, working uh, with various client groups. So that I guess that I've been doing that sort of for about 19 and a bit years. So I guess that's a bit about me.
Cool, cool. Thanks for that. And so, what are the issues that you're seeing most predominantly? Right, like I kind of tongue in cheek in the intro talked about the patriarchy and asking how the fellas are doing, but um, you know, I think it is very different being a man in the world today than it is being a woman, right? And I think we all have our own you know I guess benefits or advantages with respect to certain aspects of our gender, right? But I think there's also some downsides too, and I think that's what you're primarily focused on. So if you maybe talk me through some of the common issues you see, some of the problems that are sort of plaguing men and boys, yeah, I'd like to hear directly from you.
Well, certainly in practice, there's a whole plethora of issues, and some of them are very similar to the issues that face girls and women who have been abused as well. Some of them are very, very different. I guess specifically in relation to boys and men, there is a real kind of, or can be a real loss of masculinity or a loss of their sense of masculinity, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a boy. And so I think with these people that I work with is exploring what does it mean to them to be a man, to be a boy, what does masculinity mean to them. And sadly, a lot of them have got this real ideological view that is informed by other people in their life, by the media, via various other sources. And I guess my job is to kind of explore that, work with that, empathise with it, and see where they're coming from, and at the same time explore different perspectives. Because actually, the perception that they have of masculinity is often too rigid, and it's not helping them deal with their abuse. It's hindering them. And sometimes the narrative is, yeah, well, masculinity is all about being strong and tough. So that doesn't really link well, does it, with boys and men who have been abused, because they need to acknowledge that they are vulnerable and can be vulnerable. And I would say to those people, why? Why do they need to do that? If we go down that road, and I'm not saying it's as rigid as that, but if we go down the route that says masculinity is about strength and resilience and being tough, why can't we utilise that and use it as a tool to help them in therapy to deal with their abuse? Surely that's a good thing. And that's how I work with a lot of boys and men, and I find that it works. It gets the results. It gets boys and men kind of increasing their confidence, reducing their anxiety, having a better understanding, feeling more accepting of their situation, and getting to the point where they don't feel they need sessions anymore. And that's great. That's what we want. Um, of course, there are boys and men I work with where sometimes masculinity is not mentioned. It's not always relevant. It doesn't come up. But I still find that working with them in a way that utilises what we might call more male-friendly methods can help them engage in the sessions. So rather than saying it's okay to express your emotions and be vulnerable, it might be, well, coming to therapy is you making a difficult decision, trying to fix a problem, solve things, take action, take control. And that kind of more action orientated, solution focused stuff,
Mm.
I find generally really helps boys and men engage in the process more. And I find it works, so I keep doing it, and it helps to achieve a positive outcome. I think one of the other issues I often find is that boys and men who have experienced abuse, whatever sort of abuse it is, some of them will say, well, I wasn't physically injured, or the physical injury wasn't that bad, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel that scared. And obviously, I should say, there are boys and men that I have worked with and colleagues that I know who have worked with them, and these boys and men have felt absolute terror, have felt fear, have sustained serious physical injury. So, of course, I'm not discounting that. However, the boys and men that I've worked with who have said, well, I shouldn't really complain, should I? It's not really that bad. People have got it worse than me. Actually, that there are women out there that are going through something worse than what I'm going through. Now, whether that is or isn't true, and I would say, well, regardless, there could be a man out there who's going through something worse than you, and there could be a woman who's out there going through something worse than you. It doesn't invalidate what you are going through. Yeah? And that's okay. And we say, actually, so let's just go with that narrative. So your partner, your friend, your ex, whoever was violent towards you, they were sexually abusive towards you. Yeah, okay. But the physical pain you felt, the physical injuries, according to you, were not that serious. And you didn't feel that terrified, but you did feel pretty down, depressed, and withdrawn. Did you feel respected? And
Mm.
that, I find, is a key question to ask, because if someone is perpetrating abuse to you and it results in serious physical injury, or you feeling absolutely terrified, that's a result of them showing their disrespect towards you. If you have less or no physical injuries and you don't feel that scared, but you feel very uncomfortable, you feel really, really down, that's still a consequence that's still adverse of them showing disrespect to you. And I think sometimes I find I have to challenge and explore that narrative of it doesn't really matter how severe your injuries were or were not, or how scared you were or were not. You were being disrespected. And do you think you deserve that?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, yeah, I think that there is uh, quite a prevalent sort of a common thing with among boys and men and I think across the board to dismiss abusive behavior. To minimize it, right? And I almost think of it as like the parent in your own head, right? That's speaking. Sometimes when I talk to people who have been abused, even something like spanking, right? Like in America, that's a huge thing, particularly amongst religious, conservatives. Like you're not raising your kid right unless you're hitting them, right? And then you talk to these people and they're like, oh, no, no, I turned out fine. And it's like you almost are hearing the excuses from the parent flow through the individual, right? And so I've seen that across the board, but I think it's also more prevalent in men because we are told to, just tough buck up, stiffen your back and, deal with whatever you got to deal with. And so I do see this effort to minimize things that are clearly abusive, whether it's mental abuse, emotional manipulation, a whole host of different pathological behaviors I see excused oftentimes by the individual.
Yeah, and I think I'm seeing that at the minute with comments that are made in relation to female teachers who are abusing boys. And I should put the caveat in there. I mean, I feel I don't need to do these caveats, but if you don't, you never know what's going to happen. But I think the caveat is the vast majority of female teachers are not abusive, are not predators, are not sex offenders. Of course they're not. And at the same time, we have seen a number of female teachers, certainly in the Western world, where they've been accused of or found guilty of perpetrating sexual offences against boys.
Hmm.
Many of them were boys that they were teaching. And some of the commentary, predictably, boringly, you know, you hear, oh, look at him, she's pretty fit, and so on. So for me, it can be sometimes useful to take the gender out of it and ask the question. So what we're saying is, if you have a 14-year-old teenager, for example, who wants to have sex with their hot maths teacher, so you've got this really good-looking teacher in their early 30s, a teenager who's 14, the 14-year-old fancies this teacher, the 14-year-old wants to do something sexual with this teacher also wants to do something sexual with this child, this teenager, then that's okay because they're both good looking and they both want to do it. Well, actually, we only apply that narrative to young boys and adult female teachers. We don't apply it when it's good looking male teachers to the girls. And the narrative
Hmm.
that often comes there is, yes, but girls don't want to have sex with their older teachers. Some of them absolutely do. That's rubbish. I've been in this job a long time, and I know colleagues where they have worked with children, young teenage boys and girls, and they've been looking for sexual encounters with older men and women. Now, of course, these are children, they're young people, they're vulnerable, they're growing, they're developing. Maybe we should be asking ourselves what's gone on in the lives of these children to get them to the point where they are seeking out sexual encounters with adults. And at the same time, it is the adult's responsibility to be going, no, I'm an adult, you are a child, regardless of gender or how good looking someone is. That is the adult's responsibility. When that adult is that child's teacher, they are in a position of trust over them. And I don't know about many other countries, but I know here in the UK, the Sexual Offences Act is very clear that says this is an abuse of position of that you have over this child. But all of the comments online, it just becomes this real, oh, well, it's different when it's a boy. Well, there may be differences. Yeah, you could say that there is this, well, you've got young lads and they're saying, oh, she's pretty good looking. I'm lucky that she wants to, really kind of, do something with me. But these boys often become young men and older men who realise that was abuse, that was bad, that was wrong, that was
Hmm.
illegal, that shouldn't have happened. And then later on in life, they might feel really bad, really embarrassed, really guilty. And then that's something you have to explore. But I think when you've got a teenager and they are pursuing what some people might call a sexual relationship, not the best term, with an adult. Well, just because that young person wants to do that, we shouldn't go, oh well, that's what they want to do and it's fine. If we allow children to make decisions because of how they feel when they're children and to do, well, I'm not sure what the world
Mm.
would look like. So the fact that people are saying,
Yeah.
well,
Right.
just let them do it if they want to do it, well, what, should we apply that to everything children do? No, of course not. It's ridiculous. And so there's lots of issues around it. And I know the case of, was it you might was it Brittany Zamora? Was that the case? I can't remember. I might have got the name wrong, but it was a year or so ago. There was a teacher. I can't remember if she pled guilty or not guilty, but she was certainly. I think she was. She was found guilty, I believe, of sexually abusing a teenage boy who she was teaching. And one of her attorney, I think the word is right, in a press, when she spoke to the press and on TV, the wording was appalling. And this attorney had said, you need to remember, this was not a young child. This was a teenage
Mm.
boy. I think he was 14 or 15, I can't remember the exact age. And he pursued her.
Oh,
It's
geez.
like, oh, oh, this poor teacher, how traumatized and stressful it must be to have to deal with this attention from this teenage boy. No, you are the adult, be the adult and act like the adult. And but this attorney just, and somebody in the press, I mean, good on them, I don't know who it was, someone in the press said, sorry, have you really just made those comments? Would you're blaming the child for this? And I did what I usually do when I watch this. I'm like, swap the genders. Swap the genders. If
Yeah.
this
Yep.
was a good looking teacher in his late 20s who was pursued by a 14-year-old girl, there's no way we would be trying to garner that
Nope.
type of sympathy.
Nope. 100%. It's a very weird double standard, and I've often thought about why that is. Do you have any hypothesis? Because I really can't think of one. I'm trying to explore evolutionary psychology and try to figure out, so like, what would be behind this. It, is it a power dynamic where it's much more egregious because a male is physically more can overpower. There's that like dynamic power dynamic physically. um, I can't really put my finger on it. I've thought about it a lot. I want to know if you have any thoughts on that
In
subject.
very simple, I mean, there's lots of thoughts around that. They perhaps some people agree or disagree, but it could be said there are to some extent evolutionary reasons, biological reasons, societal reasons. All of it kind of influences to some degree. Um, my view, from what I see, from what I hear, from the work I do, it's because we live in a world that cares a lot more about the feelings and safety of girls and women, and a lot less about the feelings and safety of boys and men. And you could go, the
Got it.
last 50, 60 years of history proves that, and I think we're seeing it even more and more now. So when people, I a few weeks ago I put a tweet online, and I just basically listed all of the issues and adversities that boys and men face: suicide, homelessness, drug deaths, most victims of homicide, etc., etc., etc. The attitudes that we have, and so on. And I knew there'd be some hateful comments, but I did not expect the number of hateful comments that came. They were vicious, and some of them though
Hmm.
beautifully said, "Nobody cares. We don't care." And I went, exactly, that's the point. Nobody does care. And that's why people
For
like me are trying to highlight this. And I'm certainly not saying everything's 50-50. I'm certainly not one of these that believes every single thing in life should be perfectly 50-50. It's just not really reasonable. But I certainly, we can't get that because that's ridiculous. But I certainly don't think it should be like that. And that is exactly what it is like. There is more funding, more energy, more effort, more care, more sympathy, more attention given to all the issues that affect girls and women. And I have no problem with that whatsoever. The problem that I have is when so much focus goes on to these issues and comparatively little focus goes on into the issues affecting boys and men.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree, and I think you're right. Just to circle back, I think the issue of male disposability is probably at the heart of it, and I think that does have an evolutionary basis to it. Obviously, there's societal factors too, but ultimately, if you get down to brass tacks, from a Darwinian perspective, eggs are more valuable than sperm. Period, and that's just something that I think everyone in society has to understand. Like that's just a fact. Okay, cool. Let's move on, right? Like you can, to your point, like you can have all of the empathy and all of the sympathy and all, we're trying to provide care for women. That's great, great, do that. But maybe guys too, right? Like I think the point that, or the issue I have, is what you just called out. If somebody in good faith is trying to help another human being who happens to be male, and you get hate for it, right? Like, I don't care, fuck off. Like, that stuff is a real problem, right? So I think that is really the kind of the crux of the problem I see. Particularly, it's offensive to me being a victim. I got the whole gamut. I don't know if you know my background, but I was sexually abused at 8 years old. I was physically abused by a stepfather, and not just that, just horrible mental abuse growing up. My first wife, kind of as a result of untreated, unresolved trauma, I married somebody who was a very much carbon copy of my stepfather. And it was domestic violence, and also she had mental health issues. A horrible, horrible person. And so I've run the gamut, and I've suffered pretty greatly from the abuse. And so when I'm thinking about it, like if somebody's trying to reach out to help me, because believe me, I didn't pursue it. I avoided it for years. I didn't go to therapy until I was in my 40s. And somebody says, no, fuck you. Like, I have a real problem with that. That's just appalling.
Yeah, and I think that this is, there's lots of theories behind this. One of them is, so I know exactly what some people would say, you were sexually abused when you were younger. Yes, by a man, by another man. It was by another man. And it's what there's two things, and it's a colleague that is in a group that I run who said this, so I can't really say I claim this, but I often use it a lot, that when the focus is on boys and men experiencing pain, suffering, abuse, discrimination, or disadvantage, you can always be assured that there will be people who will desperately move the focus from that onto either women have got it worse or men are the problem. That always
Hmm.
happens. You can be guaranteed of it. Absolutely guaranteed. Here in the UK, we've been trying to get a minister for issues affecting men. I think there was less than 8,000 people signed the petition, and that's just another example that no one, men and women, just don't care. I mean, maybe they didn't know about it. There could have been more advertising. But when it was in the news, and you had a few MPs, not many, and a few people saying, "Should we have a minister men? Should we not?" And there was some discussion around why are we even asking the question. Why do we not have one? There are plenty of issues that disproportionately and in some cases uniquely affect us. Why don't we have one? We're not saying take anything away from girls and women, not at all, although I think that's how some people perceive it. And
Hmm.
when there were panel shows and people discussing this in the news and things, I watched this and I said to some friends I was watching at the time, I would watch this. I guarantee you, and there was a few other panelists on this. Watch this. I guarantee you, someone what they'll do is they'll either say, "Well, men are the problem," or "Women have got it worse." I guarantee it. And right on cue, that's exactly what happened. And it would be, but even if we go down that route, well, let's just say that women have got it worse. Now, how we measure something like that is a bit of a thing. I think for me, it's about saying, there are problems that women have, there are problems that men have. Let's not compete for victimhood. Let's just acknowledge the different types. And yes, there are certain types of harm that men, a minority of men on the planet, are more likely to perpetrate, and there are types of harm that perhaps women, a minority of women on the planet, are more likely to perpetrate. There's types of harm that's kind of 50-50. But even that narrative, well, women have got it worse and men are the problem, that absolutely in no way invalidates the pain, the suffering, the discrimination, and the harm that these men are facing. Absolutely not. If I go down the street and I'm mugged by a man with a knife and he has my money, if I phone the police, which I may or may not do, and they come out, how is it going to be helpful for them to come to me on that level and say, "Well, hang on, you're a man, you were mugged by another man, so, what? How is that helpful? What? How? So saying that just the fact that we share a demographic, would you do it? Would you do it with any other demographics? Absolutely not. You'd be condemned for prejudice straight away. But either people can't see the prejudice, they don't believe you can be prejudiced towards men, which is wrong, or they poorly attempt to justify their prejudice. And so there's a real problem, and I see it getting worse. That's the scary thing. I don't see it getting better. There's glimmers of hope. There's pockets of positivity, but and that's great. But it's kind of like the positivity and the good action to tackle all this. It's kind of going up like that, whereas the hate and the nastiness is going up like that. That's what I see.
Yeah, I see that too, and I wonder when the pendulum's gonna swing, right? Because I don't think it can go on this way forever. Because when people actually zoom out, and because I hear these comments from people, I hear it in public, just flippantly saying things, like what's the latest one? Would you rather be in a forest and have an encounter with a bear or a man? Right? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's like
So, I mean, that's something
it's
that I was
becoming.
involved in last night and the day before. I caught the back of this, and it's a trend that's gone on. And I think it's on TikTok or whatever. I'm not on TikTok. I don't
Mhm.
use that. I'm on enough toxic platforms out there. But the BBC saw that I had seen that I was commenting on this trend, and they asked me to appear on some radio show to talk about it. Which, I have to. I'm always at, journalists. They're not. Who are they? What's going on? And anyway, it turns out I can't do it because I'm going to be on a train going down south to visit a friend, so I'm not going to be available. But the thing is, and I won't kind of go on about this because I wrote a very long thread about this the other day about the bear or the bear or a man, and what does it mean, and some are saying that, well, no, women are just trying to explain how scared they are of men, and I'm going, okay, do you know, some women, perhaps, yeah. However, there's still more issues to explore there. However, the blunt reality is this, for some women and some men as well, you know, it's some men as well, they are not sharing this and supporting this trend because they want men to know that women are scared of them. It's an attempt to say we can go online, make hateful comparisons between the behaviours of men and the behaviours of bears, do it publicly and proudly with very, very little consequence. And we can do that, and we will do that. But for me, I'm thinking, well, but why are you doing that? Okay, so if you would really prefer to be in the woods with a bear than a man, fine. Your choice, that you're allowed to do. But actually, people are also allowed to respond to that and give a counter argument. And what's happening is there are some people using fear. They are weaponizing fear. And it's the case of, do you know what? I might feel scared to be in the woods with a man more than a bear. Okay, let's explore that. Let's talk about it. Let's kind of get deeper into that. But there are some people out there who are weaponizing fear and using it to justify widespread misandry. And if we did that with any other demographic, if someone used their fear to justify widespread prejudice towards any other demographic, oh, the headlines would be printed all over the place. There would be outrage. But because it's directed at men, we care less. And it comes back to that point. We just don't care as much about men as we do women. And that's the problem. We care so much less. And for me, there's something about, okay, well, if someone is, because I don't want women to go around living their lives being scared. Who does? Not at all. And at the same time, if you are scared, how do we reduce that fear? Do we want that fear to be reduced? I do. If you've got women out there that are feeling genuinely scared and it's affecting their lives, well, that needs to be addressed. But as I think it was journalist Joe Hildebrand once said, abusive men aren't going to listen to you, and good men don't need to be told. Who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? And that's the and I think that's the thought. And as soon as you kind of come with a little bit of constructive criticism or trying to explore, you're a misogynist, etc. It's like, no, not at all. I'm not a misogynist. I don't want women to feel scared. I'm trying to do something that helps them reduce that. I work with clients every other week who have got some sort of fear that's affecting their life. Yeah, I want to help them reduce that fear, not maintain it. So the suggestion, oh, you're a man, if you see a woman, you should cross over the road. No, I shouldn't. I should walk past her. I should smile at her and maybe say good morning. Because by doing that, the more men that do that, the evidence builds up to say the vast majority of men that you meet from the minute you get up to the minute you go to bed wish you absolutely no harm whatsoever. Yeah, you're not going to learn that or find that out if you avoid men and men avoid you.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And it's interesting to me. There's a couple of things I want to tease out here. We talked about the evolutionary reasons for some of this behavior, and I think that's fairly clear. But I also think the societal aspect is sort of rooted in this kind of increase in postmodernism, where if you're familiar with it, it sort of is skeptical of grand narratives, and it basically says we can't know anything about objective reality, and that everything is simply a power game between groups of human beings, right? And so the males are sort of viewed in this primary state of power, and so therefore you can attack, right? And that's where I think a lot of this nastiness comes from. I think there's a lot of people that just follow along, but I think if you actually look at the academic roots of the movement, that's kind of where it starts. It filters out from universities and it makes its way onto social media, and that's where you get the man versus bear trend stuff. It is constant. You see you're recycling the new thing, right, on TikTok or whatever the platform is. So I think that is a component of it. But it's just appalling to me was when I think about, okay, well, you can say horrible things about these men, and then you realize, like, wait a minute, I have a father, I have brothers, I have uncles. That most people who say these things would look at these people and say, well, no, not those people, not the ones I know. Right, but obviously all these other men that I don't know, they're immediately indicted, right? So it's a very weird thing. These people seem to hold two contradictory ideas in their mind without even being aware of the cognitive dissonance.
Absolutely. And when people say, "Oh, well, not the guys I know, other guys," well, those other guys, there are girls and women in their lives that are probably going to say, "Oh, well, not these guys." So which guys? And I think that's the thing. It's just that men are generally, in my experience, only treated as a collective based on the harm the minority of them do. Never really as the good many more of them do, and that just makes absolutely no sense. It's just, apart from it being really hateful and irrational, it's bad maths, simply put.
It definitely is, and you're a psychologist. You probably know the literature on this. It's like it's a very small minority of men, and it's true. Like if you look at human aggression, you look at the distribution of men versus women. Aggression is very similar, right? We're
Mm.
more alike, gender comparison wise, than we are different. But at the tail end, it really, really matters. Like the most aggressive, the most violent people are always men, almost exclusively, right? And I think that very end of that distribution is what everyone focuses on and indicts everyone else. When in reality, like I said, the vast majority of human beings are equally aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fallacy that I think, I mean, I might get this wrong, but I believe it's called the Nadir fallacy, where ultimately you take the minority, you take the harm and severe harm or abuse perpetrated by a minority of a demographic and use that to represent the entire demographic. It's a fallacy, and I think it's called the Nadir fallacy. But ultimately, I should say is that I'm not a psychologist. Anybody hearing this might think, I'm not a psychologist. I'm a counsellor and psychotherapist. Just have to make that really,
Okay,
really clear.
thanks
I
for
don't want to be
clarifying.
making claims that I'm something I'm not. But I think aggression, ultimately, we all get aggressive. We just display it differently. And one of the things that I often say is that, right, let's think about the average sex differences, or the average sex differences. So males, on average, have got more parts of their brain dedicated to action, movement, coordination, more muscle. A minority of those guys are going to use that to harm. A larger number will use it to help. Women, on average, have got more parts of their brain dedicated to language, communication, etc., etc. A minority of them will use that to harm, i.e., false allegations, etc., etc. A larger number of them will use it to help. Um, it just makes sense, but we just don't talk about it like that. And if you look at I don't know if you know the PASK website, PASK. It's a website that's
I
got, I
don't.
think, over 1,700, I think, peer-reviewed research study papers, etc., all addressing domestic abuse, domestic violence, spanning 40 years. The cumulative findings show that the vast majority of domestic violence is sort of bidirectional, and of
Mm.
the domestic violence that is not bidirectional, most of it is started by women. But we don't talk about that. And what we do is we rely heavily on the crime statistics. But most of the crime statistics rely on a victim saying something and disclosing something to the police. A wealth of research shows that male victims of female perpetrated crimes are a lot less likely to tell the police than female victims of male perpetrated crimes. And so, for me, there's so much data and evidence out there to support that. The logical thing would be, what are we going to do to help more boys and men who have been abused to talk, to disclose to the police? And the answer is nothing. We're not doing much at all. Nothing. What we know is we've got the Lord Mayor of London here who did that campaign. I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically like the bear or the bear or the man narrative, where it was basically saying, oh, come on, men are the problem, men need to change, all of this. Again, replace men with any other demographic, you see the outrage pretty quickly. Um, but it's a case of, well, what are we doing to encourage more boys and men to talk, to report to the police? It's all, whether you're a man or a woman, it's your choice. It's your choice if you want to tell the police regardless. But we are doing a lot more to try and encourage girls and women to disclose than we ever have with boys and men, despite the fact that actually a wealth of research shows that they are a lot less likely to disclose. We should be addressing that, and we're not.
Yeah, yeah, definitely true. And to your point from earlier, like there seems to be a lot of hatred directed towards people who even discuss men's issues from the context of trying to help people improve. So it's this narrative of, oh, men need to do better, and fellas, we do, like across the board. Humans do, right? Like women have issues that they've got to deal with, men have issues that we've got to deal with, and we should all be encouraging everyone to get better. That's actually the whole point of this podcast, aiming up. Like, hey, everybody, let's raise the bar. Let's improve. And but folks who will bring up issues impacting men and boys, like you said, are sort of putting a bullseye on their back and are subject to an incredible amount of hate. And I really would like to see that tide turn, because there are people, as you probably know from dealing with these folks in counseling, had horrible childhoods, have suffered terrible abuse, and they're trying to do the best they can. But as you know, unresolved trauma can cause all sorts of negative behaviors that are probably rightly called out by folks, right? That things that women are generally not happy with behavior wise, right? And so it's like, okay, cool, we're trying to help people be better. And it's like, no, fuck you. And that stuff is, that's probably the most infuriating thing that I see in today's culture. And I don't really know how to address it.
I mean, it's a really difficult thing. I mean, coming back to what you said at the start about patriarchy, one of the comments is, oh well, the problems of men are caused by other men, so men as a problem, you're a problem, deal with it, And I think, hang on a minute, again, there's something there where, well, you're a victim, and you share the same demographic as the perpetrator, right? Well, that's enough for
Mm-hmm.
me to wash my hands and say I'm not getting involved. There you go. And I think any decision to help someone, to support someone, or whatever, I'm not sure that we should really be solely basing that on whether you share a demographic or not. There are plenty of other factors that I think we should be considering that we don't. But so, oh, well, you're a man. Oh, well, I'm not interested. Bye bye. No, are you proud of that? Is that something to be proud of? So I think that's the other problem as well. But even then, the patriarchy is a really interesting concept, because there are so many definitions of it, so many interpretations, and whenever I've debated with people in the past about patriarchy, I've got to define it. And some people, quite a large number of people, in my experience, get so angry and defensive. I would define it. Look, I can't debate with you about something if you're not going to define what the you don't know what the patriarchy is. How stupid are you? I went, right, fine, call me stupid. So, but it would help me tell me what definition you are using of patriarchy. And then, why are you refusing to do that? Defend your point. Why can't you do that? Why do you refuse? Some people have defined it, and there's lots of difference. Two that I often hear is society by men, for men, to benefit men, to protect, control, and exclude women. Well, I see very little evidence to support that theory. Very, very little evidence to support that theory. And the other one is basically it's a basically government. It's all the important decision makers in our country, all men, all men. And I go, all men, really? Is that true? So over here in the UK, I think we have, or certainly we've got, I think, a third, about 35% of the MPs that we have here are women. So that is, that's a third. Okay, yes, the majority are men, but a third isn't a tiny amount.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, I think it was 40% of senior police chief constables women. So again, it's not as if that women are absolutely not in these positions of influence and power. Um, but if we go down that route of patriarchy, all these big, rich, powerful men making the decisions in the House of Commons, House of Parliament, whatever, they're there. Well, how are they helping me out? What are they doing? So can we have a minister for men, please? Not interested. Uh, can we have a parallel strategy? Like, you've got the violence against women and girls strategy here. Great, I'm all for that. Can we have a parallel one for boys and men? No, we'll give you a 10-page statement or whatever. Okay, all this funding goes into helping victims of domestic violence. So the Office of National Statistics last data, I think, said roughly a third of victims are men. And again, that's predominantly from crime data. I think it's a lot more than a third. But even if we just go down with a third, right, well, can we have a third of the funding? No. Right, okay. how is the patriarchy benefiting me? What is it doing to help me? As a guy, as I'm sure you know this, as a guy, I can walk the streets. I'm statistically more likely than a woman to be stabbed, killed, robbed, and experience violence. So what are we doing about that? And the answer is, well, nothing, because we care more about how women feel about that than you, even though you're statistically more likely to experience that. And one of the reasons, well, because if the person does it to you, it's probably going to be another man, and that's just enough to justify caring less. How can this be anything to be proud of? How? History is full of examples of where groups of people have been, treated appallingly, and judgment has been given to them. I think that in a few years we will look back, and hopefully we should look back going and feel real shame about how we treated men. Absolutely. Again, I'm not saying women have got it easy. I'm not saying it's all perfect for them. But what I am saying is that the adversities that they face generally get a lot more media attention, a lot more funding, and a lot more support compared to what men get.
Yeah, they definitely do. And I do think that there will come a time when men are needed, right? And this typically, and I hate to say this, but when things are going very badly in society, right? You have, real dire situation like war, right? Like that's a time when people suddenly seem to remember that men have some utility, right? Um, so it's one of those things that I hate. I hope it doesn't go that direction, but I suspect it probably will. Like hard times are going to invite in masculinity again, and so I think that might end up turning the tide, and the pendulum will swing the other way. But I would really love it if people could be like, no, like we should actually work on cultivating positive masculinity, the traits that everybody sees as valuable, and sort of elevate men to try to be their best selves. Or I think it's better for society as a whole. It's better for everyone, right? So that's kind of where my focus is. And regardless of maybe you were swimming upstream, but I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, right? Because I think there's so few people want to even talk about these issues that it's viewed as toxic and scary. You might get canceled. But I'm like, forget about it. Like it's a real need. And so what do you think we could do towards that end, right? Like how can we help people feel comfortable talking about these things, maybe feel comfortable going to therapy, or improving, across the board in these areas. Like, because I see men erasing themselves. I think everyone is so afraid to be a man, and they're turning into this unnatural type of human where they're sort of, just like I said, just ghosting them, just completely erasing themselves and trying to just sort of slip through society without being noticed, or offending anyone or hurting anyone's feelings, or even being yelled at, right? And I think that's tragic. So I want to know what your thoughts from all the people you've encountered. Like what's the way forward? How can we help people get better?
Keep talking. So I've had a
Mm.
few, well, not in the last few weeks, but certainly I get quite a lot of private messages on Twitter, or I did do, and in emails. And one of the themes that connects many of them are from boys and men that have said they've seen what I've said online, and it gives them hope. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel that they are not bad for being guys. I remember one teenage boy that messaged me and said, "Am I bad because I'm a boy? Am I going to become a rapist because I'm a boy?" What? Where on earth? That's a whole. How on earth is this guy? Well, it's just awful. And But most of them don't feel able to like that tweet. They don't feel able to agree publicly with me because they are worried that they're going to be called a misogynist. That's what it is. It's no, no, no. It's not about women. If you're saying, actually, I think men get a pretty crap deal. Boys are not treated very well. These are the issues that affect boys and men. Let's kind of shine a light on that. Talk about it. Have a discussion. Can masculinity be a really good thing? Of course it can. Let's have a discussion. But the perception is, oh, hang on a minute. You hate women. What? No. I donate money to the Cats Home every month. Doesn't mean I hate dogs. It's this ridiculous ideological assumption, and I think sometimes it's projection. And it's coming from people
Mm.
who are talking so much about women's issues because they do hate men. So then, when you've got men talking about men's issues, they assume, wrongly in many cases, not all, but many cases, that, oh, you must hate women as well. Well, one, no, that's not the case. Definitely not. If I hated women, I would be reveling in the fact they're out there terrified. No, I think it's horrible. They're terrified, and let's try and reduce it, as I've said. Um, but the narrative is there is, well, it's okay for women to hate men. It's not okay for men to hate women. What about just not hating anyone based on demographic? Um, and so the answer to your question is talk more. Even though we're ignored, even though we're dismissed, even though in some cases we are hated, even though um, we are minimised, ridiculed, celebrated when we suffer in some cases, even though that happens, and even though maybe the government and whatever aren't always helping us out in the best way they could, let's not be silent. Let's talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and say things and challenge things. Once a month, well, roughly once a month, I run an online group for men from all around the world. And we vary in size. Some months there's maybe 12. I mean, and then other months there's 6. It really goes up and down in size. But what we do in this group is we talk about what's going on in the world that's affecting men. And so we met. Was it last week or the week? Yeah, it was last week we met, and we went online and we talked about what people had seen online, what people had read in the news, certain comments. There was the recent Bondi tragedy in Australia where the man went into the shopping centre and a horrible
Yep.
tragedy and so on. And there were these there was the claims of it looks like it might be motivated by misogyny, but then as usual that the problem is men. Look, the problem is men. The problem is men, and it's using this horrible tragedy to justify just mass hatred of men generally. So that's what we talked about as well. And so find like-minded people, get those connections, because actually it can validate you. It can make you feel that you're not alone, and I think that's often what we. I think that's what we need. But keep talking, keep doing that. I've got a lovely, lovely set of loyal followers. Some of them say things I don't agree with. Some of them say things I do agree with. But I've got that many followers, I can't keep up with what everybody's saying. And despite what some people say, it's not my job to police my followers. But a lot of them, and some of the regular followers, they make some really great points. They poignantly, articulate, express themselves. I learn from them as well, and it's really good to think I'm not on my own here. I'm not the only one that's fed up of how boys and men are being treated. So it's validating for me, and it kind of gets the message that goes out there as well. And even though we're not going to, or we're very, very unlikely to change the minds of those that have a real entrenched misandristic view about boys and men, what we can do is provide hope, and it can also make boys and men who are seeing all of this but don't feel able to say anything know they're not alone, and there are people out there sort of fighting your corner.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that a lot of people get so focused on macro that they underestimate the impact of the micro. What I mean is like, oh well, let's complain to the government. Let's get an MP for men. Let's do like, yeah, fine. Like if you want to do that, that's great. But I think people underestimate the impact they can have by just talking to people. Like you said, if you don't feel comfortable in public forum, DM somebody you feel safe talking to. And if you do feel somewhat comfortable, like you and I on social media, discussing these issues, you know, just speak plainly, right? Like articulate your case and be clear that you're trying to help other human beings, right? Like if you do that, I think that you can move the needle a lot more than trying to focus on that macro. I think that there's so many people are scared and so many people are not saying what they actually think because of fear, right? And I think a lot of the fear is overblown, like this fear of being canceled, this fear of being attacked. Number one, like if you're scared that someone's going to call you a bad word online, it's like, man, I don't know what to tell you, because that's just going to happen. Like you just have to understand, you're connected to millions of people online, and you're to your point, like you don't know what all these people believe and what they're going to say, and you can't police their activities, and they're going to say some nasty, horrible things to you. You kind of have to understand that going in, right? And so, like, cool, like you can vibe with the people that you resonate with, and ignore the haters. Like I think that's the best
Yeah, I
antidote
mean,
here. I think the
I've
more
certainly learned
people,
that, and I've learned it the hard way. There are things in the past, I'll be honest, that I said and did that were perhaps a bit inappropriate. I regret saying certain things. My emotions got the better of me. But I think I've learned from that. I've grown, I've developed, and I think, sometimes it's best just to say nothing, because what is the point? If someone's gonna, send me lots of hate, nastiness, threats in some cases, well, why bother responding? They are typing away from behind an anonymous account with very few followers that I'm not going to change their mind. I'm not going to probably give them a different perspective. They're not open-minded enough to see a different perspective. They think their I don't know, their ideology, what they firmly hold on to, is being threatened. But so there's just no point. And I get that many tweets and things now. It goes so quickly sometimes I can't keep up with it. So just from a practical point of view, I can't. But I think one of the ways that I often find that can help deal with all this is laughter. Laughter
Hmm.
is amazing. And so sometimes, if it's getting a bit much, watch something funny on YouTube that's going to make you giggle or laugh. Find a site with silly jokes and laugh. But the other thing as well is, if someone gives you an insult, own it, take it and use it, laugh at it. Absolutely, someone said to me the other day, horrible parasitic sub creature, go and rot. Uh, and I shared it, and I went, well, with the amount of cakes I eat, I don't think I'm going to be rotting anytime soon. And it was just kind of turning into a little bit of humour, because it's kind of saying, your comment doesn't affect me. It's not going to stop me doing what I'm doing. It's not going to stop me saying what I'm saying. If anything, it proves to me this is why we need to keep doing it more. Because if these are attempts to silence us, and I think sometimes they're not going to work, we might be silent sometimes and take a few days off and whatever. But generally speaking, no. There's a number of people building up and all of that. But if we can laugh at things and see the funny side of it, I remember someone what was it? Someone had said that I had commented on my appearance and said I looked like they said I looked like a children's TV character. And I found it hilarious, because I thought, actually, I do look a little bit like that children's TV character. And so I put a picture of me next to the children's TV character. Oh, yes. I don't know what they're talking about, but just laugh at it, make light of it. And it takes the power out of it. And that's the thing. It's like, and you can laugh at it and joke at it. And I think that's something that we need to do more of, use humour. Certainly in therapy, when it's appropriate, you can use humour to help boys and men settle in, break the ice, build a relationship. There was a project. I'm going back a few years now. I don't know if they're still doing it, but somewhere in the UK, that what they did is there was a project where they got a load of men who had suicidal thoughts or who had tried to take their own life. They trained them to become stand-up comedians, and then each of them did like a stand-up comedy set to their friends and family, where they laughed and joked about suicide. And it just took the trauma and the distress out of it, and it became something funny. And it was really, and I'm going back a few years now, so I can't remember the details, but there's more there about how that can really, really help people, when you use appropriate humour.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's very important for people to not just laugh at themselves, right? And be vulnerable and self-deprecating. I think that can diffuse a lot of the hatred that people receive. But also, I would encourage people, even if you're receiving some of the most hateful, vile stuff from the troll farm, uh, don't respond in kind, even though it may be sometimes justified. I see the sort of the backlash and the response. And you get the Andrew Tates of the world, you get and then you're seeing the people that troll on the other side as well. And so I would just encourage people not to do that.
Exactly. I think that's the thing. There's nothing. You could do. Find a load of guys. Start a group online or in the real world. Speak to guys. Talk about these issues. Vent. Get your anger out. Some of us. There are plenty of times in the group that I run where we do get angry. We express our anger, but it feels good to do it. And there are other people that I know of online in the real world that say, "Oh, right, a group of guys just getting together moaning," and I've gone, "Yep, what's the problem with that? What's it with that?" I went,
Hmm.
people keep telling men, you've just got to open up, you've just got to open up. That's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing. It's a load of guys sharing their thoughts, their feelings, what frustrates them. And actually, if you go into that meeting and your frustration at seeing some anti-male thing online and other things, if your frustration is there, having a good moan about it and feeling validated and having people listen to you, your frustration is probably going to go down there. So that's a change in how you feel. That can only be a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. It's so hard to be angry at somebody that refuses to engage in kind, right? And I think that's something and I get it. Like it's very easy to get riled up and emotional about a type of interaction online. But I've had some of the best interactions with people that I definitely don't agree with. That maybe started off people coming in pretty hot,
Mm.
and just the fact that I didn't engage in kind, and he's like and approach their point with curiosity, ask them questions, sort of lower the temperature of the room. I think it's very hard
Mm.
for those people that are in the mindset of demonizing guys to keep going. It's almost impossible to do as a human being.
I think it depends on the person and what they're saying and how they interact. If someone is, as someone, someone did a few days ago, if someone is saying, I'm really glad that men are killing themselves, we need to
Oh,
abort male babies. Which is interesting. This is an account said, misandry does not exist, from an account called Abort Male Babies. I mean, the irony is hilarious. But it's the case of what you clearly you are initiating contact with all these nasty, hateful things, and you want some sort of a reaction. The reaction
hmm,
I think you don't think you want is one of humour, because it takes the
yep,
power out of what you're doing, and it gives us back that control. So, sometimes ignoring them, you say, "You're not worth my time. Go away." But sometimes responding with humour. But then again, if you can, as you said, if you can get into a respectful debate or disagreement, that can be great. I find it rarely happens. And I used to try that, and I think I've got a little bit more cynical now, where I used to be, oh, okay, you've made a really interesting comment there. I don't agree with it, but would you be willing to engage in a debate slash discussion in a respectful manner? And people either just don't respond, or they respond with more horrible hate, which is like, clearly you don't want to then. But I'm like, well, why, rather than just sort of get into it. And so, you've got to pick your battles and things. Certainly, I've been criticised because some of my followers have said some pretty horrible things to women.
hmm,
Again, from what I see, and I don't see everything. I think that's like people assume that I see everything. I don't see everything. But from what I see, the majority of my followers don't say horrible misogynistic things. A minority of them do. There's like, yes, but you don't challenge that. No, I don't, because I don't want to. I don't want to get it. Just because I don't challenge it doesn't mean I support it
yeah,
at all. There are plenty of things I see online, a lot more horrible anti-male things. I don't always challenge that. And sometimes you might think, do you know what? Do you want to get involved in another big, long, back and forth argument that is probably going to, in most cases, resolve in absolutely nothing useful? Not really. So leave them to it. And that's, sometimes that can be the best thing. You've got to look after yourself as well, because it can be quite hostile there.
yeah. I feel like that's another avenue of playing the gotcha game. Which so one of your followers said this horrible thing. I saw that happen to even something like Jordan Peterson. Got millions and millions of followers. I think the Kathy Newman one was an example of that. The Kathy Newman interview. Oh, they said terrible things to Kathy. It's like, what does that have to do with him? Like that doesn't make any sense. That you would be responsible for policing the speech of everyone who
But
happens to follow you on a social media account.
but it's another example of that absolutely irrational expectation of collective responsibility. We
Hmm.
talked about it. Well, men, you're responsible for abusive men. Your followers online, you are responsible for them because they follow you. No, I'm not. I'm not responsible at all in any way, shape, or form for them. Not at all. In no, it's social media. Anyone can go online and say all manner of things whenever they want, however they want. If you think that the person they follow is always responsible and should always take responsibility for something one of their many, many followers that says others, then that's quite a naive, childlike way of thinking. No, not at all. Not at
I
all.
don't think it's genuine either. Like I think it's just another avenue for attack, just another tactic, and so just ignore that crap.
Yeah,
Like say
absolutely.
what you have to say. Be an honest, sincere person, trying to do good in the world, and let the chips fall where they may. That's my best advice.
Yeah.
Well, hey, it's probably a good place to leave it. I got a hard stop I'm running up against, but Phil, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an awesome conversation. Would you tell everyone where they can find you?
Oh well, online, I guess. Yeah, going to Twitter or X. I still can't bring myself to call it X. I'm sorry, I just can't. So, what Twitter, X, whatever you call it. Phil Mitchell 83. You'll see my ugly mug as the profile picture, and that's me. There are apparently a few accounts out there pretending to be me, but you'll pretty quickly figure out which one's the real me. So yeah, that Twitter is the main place where I am. If anyone's interested, they can buy my book. It talks about the sexual abuse of boys and men, and it's just called "The Sexual Abuse of Boys and Men: Creating an Approach for Neglected Victims." It's relatively cheap, about £13 on Amazon. Even though it focuses on the sexual abuse of boys and men, there are chapters that do talk about how poorly boys and men are treated and how male victims are treated as well. So it might be something people find useful. And yeah, I guess that's me.
Awesome. Well, hey, keep doing good work, man. You're really one of the good ones out there, and I really appreciate your content. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll chat with you later.
Thanks very much, Red. All the best. Take care. Okay.